Are you feeling lost and oftentimes wonder, will anyone ever find me in this dark place? I feel you, I see you, I was there until I found Jesus and His grace. Welcome to the If It's Just One podcast. I'm your host, Stashani Atkins. I must admit I don't have it all together, but I believe with a little encouragement we will make it to heaven together. We oftentimes underestimate the power of one, but Jesus left the 99 for one. And so, if this podcast only reaches one person, that's all that matters. This podcast will be focused on encouraging you, my brothers and sisters, to rise above the challenges that prevent us from being who God has called us to be. Stay tuned. We really need each other. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm at episode 10 and today I will be talking about grief. It's a touchy topic, but we will unpack it anyways. Grief is the pain experienced after significant loss, usually the death of a loved one. Grief is inevitable. I believe we will all experience grief, and if we're not the one who is grieving, we will see someone else grieve. Many, if not all of us, have experienced the death of a loved one that shattered our hearts. Their face will never be seen again in this life, their laugh never heard, and their company never enjoyed. What does grief do to us? It may cause us to feel sadness, numbness, loneliness, emptiness, anger, resentment, confusion, and a loss of interest in things that used to bring pleasure. I believe if all these emotions are not processed properly, the devil will try to introduce himself to distract us from what God has called us to do and who God has called us to be. 1 Peter 5 verse 8 tells us to be sober and vigilant because our adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. During our time of grief, we are vulnerable, and it's like we're thrown off course, and so we might not be sober and vigilant, and the devil, whose job is only to steal, kill, and destroy, can attack us in our vulnerable state. He will try to turn us against God and say things like, if God is with you, why has all this happened? God hates you, that's why He's allowing you to suffer, or you have brought this upon yourself. This is punishment for the evil you have committed, and if God is powerful like He says He is, why can't He bring back this person to life? But when we read the Bible, we get to see the schemes of the devil and how he usually attacks. In the Bible, the devil attacked Jesus when he was in a vulnerable state. He was fasting, and so he was tired and hungry, and so he took this as a perfect opportunity to tell Jesus to turn stone into bread. When Job has lost everything, including his children, he was accused by his friends that he was the cause of what happened to him. And when the Midianites took everything away from Israel, and the angel appeared unto Gideon, saying the Lord was with him, he asked the angel, if the Lord is with us, why had all this befallen us? So we see the devil wants us to believe that God is not with us when we go through seasons like these. It's spiritual warfare, and we can't fight back unless we know who our enemy is. Our enemy is not the people who are accusing us for the loss we have experienced. Our enemy is the devil, because Ephesians 6 verse 12 tells us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And so to win this war against Satan, we're going to have to put on the whole armor of God that are mentioned in verses 14 to 17 of Ephesians 6. These are the belt of truth, breastplate of righteousness, shoes with the preparation of the gospel of peace, shield of faith, helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Grief is our natural response to loss, so I don't believe we should downplay grief. Even Jesus grieved. When his friend Lazarus died, St. John 11 verse 35 said Jesus wept. Now if Jesus felt grief, why should we not feel grief? What I believe though is that we should not be stuck in our season of grief. It should be a stage in our life and not a state. We cannot afford to spend years in denial or isolation or sadness or anger or asking what ifs. Now I would like to look at David in the Bible and how he handled a season of grief in 2 Samuel chapter 12. So, as some of us might know, that David had killed Uriah and took his wife for himself. Now David was expecting a child with Uriah's wife, Bathsheba. But God sent Nathan the prophet to tell David that his child would die because of the sin he has committed. And the child did fell sick, and the Bible said that David fasted, and he sought the Lord on behalf of the child, and he would lay upon the earth all day and night. The child died, but the elders were afraid to tell David, because if he wouldn't hearken unto their voices when the child was sick, why would he do it now since the child is dead? But David did the unthinkable. When David perceived that the child was dead because he could hear the whispering, the Bible said he got up, washed and anointed himself, changed his clothes, went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he went home, asked for bread, and eat bread, and the servants who were amazed asked him, why has he done this? And his response was, while the child was alive, he fasted and wept, because who knows if God would be gracious unto him and let the child live. But now he is dead, why should he fast? Can he bring him back to life? He said, he will go to the child, but the child cannot return to him. Now, we might not be the cause of the death of a loved one, or even if we feel we're the cause, we can learn one thing from David, and that is he didn't stay in the place of grief, but he got up, he washed, changed his clothes, and went to worship God, and then he returned home to eat. I don't know who I may be speaking to today, but your grief has held you down for too long. It's time to get up and wash, change your clothes, going to worship, and then eat something. It might not be easy, but you have it within you. You have to dig a little deeper. Death of a loved one is not the only thing we grieve. We grieve the loss of friendships and relationships. It might be hard to move on from that person because you have poured your all into the relationship, or you think you love the person too much to move on. But if they could move on, why can't you? You might be grieving the loss of a friendship because of the fun memories you shared with this person. But God has a way of working all things together for our good. Maybe the chapter of your story that these people were in has come to an end. No, Samuel was the prophet who had anointed Saul to be king over Israel. But God removed Saul because of his disobedience. And in 1 Samuel 16 verse 1, God said to Samuel, how long will you mourn over Saul, seeing that I have rejected him from being king over Israel? Fill thine horn with oil and go. I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons. Sometimes we are like Samuel, mourning for what God has already rejected, when he has already pointed us to something new or has already provided a replacement. Now, I choose to name this episode Good Grief because that's what we should practice. I once heard this phrase from Pastor Darius Daniels. He defines good grief as the ability to process the pain of the future without losing hope of the present. He also gives 4 elements of good grief. These are: 1, authenticity. This is being real with what you're feeling because God can heal what you won't reveal. 2, acceptance. This is where you accept that you're experiencing a loss, whether it is a loved one, friendship, or relationship. 3, expectation. This could be mourning with expectation that you will see your loved one again in heaven, or that a better friendship or relationship is coming. And the last one, advancement. This is where you are willing to move on without explanation. Hebrews 9 verse 27 says, it is appointed unto man once to die. If death is inevitable, then so is grief. Grief is such a painful process. And so if anyone is experiencing grief right now, I pray that God will bring you peace in this time and that he will comfort your heart as you navigate this season. But there is hope. Paul tells us in 1 Thessalonians 4 verse 14 that if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. And that's why it's so important for us to give our lives to the Lord, so we can reunite with our loved ones who have died in the Lord in heaven. And also when we die in the Lord, our friends and families here on earth can reunite with us in heaven if they give their lives to the Lord. So you see the importance of giving our lives to the Lord. My brothers and sisters, let us practice good grief, and may you remember that during your season of grief, Jesus is with you. He has left the 99 to comfort your grieving heart. So, if you have a testimony of how God has helped you through a season of grief, please feel free to share in the comment section. If this episode has encouraged you, please like and subscribe and share with someone you think it will encourage. See you in the next episode, and remember, we need Jesus and we need each other.